Hey everyone, we have a new series starting here today called Mass Making Multiples. Now, what does that mean? Well, I went through my stash and I found that I had purchased a ton of the same item in multiples, meaning I might have 5 or 6 of the same item. Now, these are all wood items that I pulled out of my stash. So this video is for inspiration for you all. Go check out what you have in your own stash pile and pull those out and have yourself a mass making party. You can use them to decorate throughout your home, cute little items to hang on hooks or shelf sitters or even tier trays if you have one of those. Now these can be stashed to use as those quick little gifts that you might need for, say, a little birthday lunch. Now what I'm using mine for is my vendor booth. These are small items which I want to tell you, I sell a ton of smalls in my booth. I have a bonus for you of something that I make in multiples. They sell every single month. I will also show you how much I'm going to price these for. If you want to know how I profit selling small items in my vendor's booth every single month, stay tuned until the end of the video. Let's go ahead and get this episode started. This first project, I was super excited when I found these in my stash. I had purchased these for like 90% off at a Hobby Lobby one year, so I think they were like $1/4 a piece. We're going to be using Roy Cycled's catalog of projects, I think is what it's called. I'll have that linked in the description box below. We're going to be using some of those little block cutouts for these. Now I'm showing you can use old wood blocks, you can use coasters, just anything similar. If you don't have these little cutting boards, even wood tags would be perfect for this project. Initially, I'd started out with 4 and found a 5th one. You'll see that added shortly. Now, I'm putting a pretty thick coat of crinoline DIY paint on here, making sure I get a thick coat down in that Noel and Joy cutout part on here so that they don't show through the decoupage papers. I've cut out the images already that I want to use on these, and we're going to go ahead, once that paint dries, we're going to put a thick layer of this Mod Podge on here, let that thoroughly dry, then we're going to add our images to the tops of these with everything dry underneath, nothing's wet, and then we're going to reactivate this Mod Podge with my little mini iron. Now you can do regular wet Mod Podge for this. You could use glue. That would be great because these are so small. The biggest thing with any of those processes is making sure you get the edges stuck down because you don't want those peeling up. Before I start ironing these on, I'm making sure that my image is where I want it and holding it before I put my parchment paper over top because it's such a small image. You want to make sure it stays in the right place before you iron it down. Now when I do my ironing, I make sure to go over it several times, hitting on those edges very well. Once I feel like it's enough, I remove the parchment paper and I feel over the image and kind of look at it and make sure the edges are ironed down. Since this is a mass making video, I am going to try to leave as much footage as possible without it being ridiculously monotonous. Since the edges of these are quite sharp, I am going to go around them with some of this paint just to kind of blend them in and not make it look like the image is not going all the way to the edge. Now you definitely can tear the images. You can use things like cardstock. You can use things like napkins, printables. There's so many things you can use. You don't have to have the decoupage paper I'm using. I just thought these images were the perfect size for these little cutting boards. Now since these are more of a novelty, kind of sit around or hang and people won't be using them or touching them, you don't necessarily need a top coat on these. I go ahead and give mine just a clear matte coat. I use that Rust-Oleum matte chalked finish. I don't do that on camera, I do it off camera. I leave the handles naturally and I leave the twine that's in them for their hanger. You definitely could change that if you want. I think some multicolored twine would be gorgeous on these. But the point is, I'm trying not to do a ton of changes or steps because when you're selling something, if you do a lot of steps or a lot of time, the more time you have in them, the less money you make. So these are perfectly fine the way they are for me to sell them, and I've definitely spent enough time on these. I will be pricing these at $4.25 a piece for my vendor booth. Now you definitely could start these around $3.50, upwards of $8, depending on your area. You want to think about the blank of this was probably $2.95 at Hobby Lobby. Well, it had that little engraving on it, so not necessarily a blank. A blank would probably be a lot cheaper. I think I paid $1/4 a piece for these. So I feel very comfortable with the amount of product and time that this is going to be a good profit per board. Let me know what you think of these in the comment section below. Our next project, I know you all have this in your stash, so go right on in and get it out of your stash because I know you have it. I started out with some pre-made molds. You guys know that if you watch this channel, that I use the amazing casting resin for my molds most of the time. I get that off Amazon. It'll be linked in the description box below. I'm using popsicle sticks. I saw these and I remembered seeing an inspiration on Pinterest of this project, so this is not my idea. It's definitely an inspiration. So I used, I think, 16 popsicle sticks, 14 for the front and 2 to hold it together on the back. Now I got out my square from Dollar Tree and used that to kind of hold things in place. They do end up a little kind of jagged on the ends, not perfectly straight, and I think that makes them look even better, you guys. But if you want them perfectly straight, just make sure when you glue them that you're holding them quite well together, or you can even tape them, put some tape on the back to hold them together. I didn't do any of that. I didn't care if they got kind of janky, but I wanted them to stay all in one place while I was working on them, and this ruler from Dollar Tree worked very well. To hold these together, I'm going to use some Titebond glue and just a drop of hot glue on each end of this stick. I'm going to let those dry very well because I don't want to mess with these. You've got a lot of sticks here that could fall apart while you're trying to work on them. The hot glue is mainly to hold this stick in its place so that while they're drying, it's not going anywhere. I ended up making 6 of these. I think 100 sticks come in a pack of popsicle sticks. I don't have these glued down. I'm just showing you, I've kind of laid them out how I want them, and now I'm using that same combination of Titebond triple thick glue and hot glue, just a tad of hot glue, because I don't want hot glue just holding my mold on. I want it 98% of this Titebond glue. Once I get them all back down and attached with glue the way that I want them, I'm going to let these set and dry overnight. I'm not going to mess with them. You can, that's up to you, but I'm going to let them dry overnight before I start working on them. I think we've already talked about this, and because this is a mass making, I do want to show a few of the multiple steps of the same thing, just so you kind of get the whole gist of it, but I will speed up some once I've made sure that you see exactly how I do things. So I chose 3 different colors for the 6, 2 of Apothecary, 2 of Sandy Blonde, and 2 Skeleton Key. These are the DIY clay paints from the clay paint line. I'm going to go ahead and give these a really good coat, and because I have some glue lines from where I glued down my molds, and then of course I have some little areas that the mold is either not complete because I'm really bad for doing shallow molds, or there's just little crevices that I want to get something in. I'm using my salt wash. You definitely can use baking soda for this or any type of product that will do the same thing. I'm just dipping into my paint, which you're not supposed to do that, and then I'm just adding the salt wash in little scoops on top of the project. This will fill in those little crevices, give your project a little bit of texture, make it look more interesting, and just overall cool. I love this stuff. The next color we use is this Sandy Blonde color. Now with it has a very thick coat at the top of my bottle of paint or my jar of paint. This is from Sitting. Clay paint will thicken, that's what I love about clay paint, and I have a super thick ring around the top of this jar. So I'm just going to grab some of that really thick paint and use it to fill underneath all my cracks and crevices and use it as my texture. So I slowed this down. As you can see, this is where I'm grabbing that really thick paint and just going under the lip of that chicken to fill in those little crevices. Now this next color I really love, Skeleton Key. It can take on different shades. It's almost a green blue, it's almost a green gray, it's almost a gray blue, but it ends up being a beautiful color for all year round. This next step is definitely an option. I wanted to dry brush over and get some really good highlights from these molds, but when I went ahead and did the main step, which is white waxing on these, I realized I didn't necessarily need the dry brushing, but what dry brushing does is just kind of highlight some areas on your piece. Now I'm going to heavily white wax these, and then I'm going to let them sit for a little while. With white wax, you can either rub it back as you go, or you can cover your whole piece and let it set so that it'll bond more to your project. And then when you wipe back, less of it will come off, and that's what we're going to do. Now, as you can see, these are really covered in wax, but wait until we wipe some of this back. Oh my gosh, I'm in love. And I can't imagine how beautiful bright colors would be like this. So definitely use this for inspiration and use whatever color of paint you want. So I do end up going back and adding something else to these, but coming up we're going to go ahead and add a hanger to these. Now I was trying to figure out if I wanted these to be more of just a wall hanger or maybe a hook hanger. I knew that they needed something because they're so flat they wouldn't do well just laying on something. So I found this nautical rope from Dollar Tree, and it's very cost effective, so that is what we're going to hang these with. And I'm using a scrap pieces, well, cut out squares from my drop cloth that I have in my stash to help hold these on. I'm going to put a lot of hot glue between the rope and the wood, and then between the piece of drop cloth and the rope and the wood, if that makes sense. If you've watched my channel long, you know that I love to add a little bit of gold to a lot of things. And this is antiquing gold. It's very muted. It's actually more of a deep browny bronze. And I thought it would look so pretty on these. And I do love how it looks. You guys let me know, did you like it before we did the antiquing wax on here? And this is called antique gold, even though to me it's not very gold in its color. But I went ahead and went over all of these with this just to add a few little highlights. Now, like I said before, the more steps you add, the less profit because you are spending more time. But for video purposes, I wanted to show you steps that you could use. You don't have to use them all, but these are some steps you can use in different projects. Plus, YouTube is also part of my business, so it also helps me with that part as well. Now you all have to let me know what you think of these, and is this something you might make for small gifts or to decorate your own home, hang on hooks, or even put in your selling platform. Now I know you all have this next project in your stash. Go ahead and get ready to go grab it. It is these cool little clothespins. I'm going to be using this vintage style. Now I'm not sure if these are true vintage. I bought them at a thrift store, but I know you can buy the reproduction ones like this as well. We're going to go ahead and give these a good coat of white clay paint. Now you can use chalk paint, you can use acrylic paint. I'm going to go ahead and do this and let these all dry. And because I want a variety of items you can use in this video, we're going to be using napkins. What we're going to do is we're going to decoupage these over our little clothespins and make these a cute little novelty item to either gift or sell. And I'm going to show you how I package these at the end of this process. Now I've gotten my napkins different places. I think this one I'm opening right now is from Hobby Lobby. They have a beautiful cheetah type print there. And you want to make sure with napkins that you completely remove the backing. Sometimes there are several layers, but how you know you've gotten them all is you should be able to see through the napkin. So I'm just going to cut down all my little blocks that's going to fit around, and then we're going to use some Mod Podge. And you can use different things. You can use glue, whatever you have, you can use it. If you use just straight like Elmer's glue, I would water it down just a bit, not much, to form a little bit of more liquid. And that's basically, in my opinion, what Mod Podge is. It's just watered down glue. I'm going to do that, and we're going to let these thoroughly dry. Now this larger piece, I do have some extra left over, and I'm going to go ahead and cut that off before I let them dry. Once these dry, I do have to end up cutting kind of in between the slots, and then I take my little sander and just sand around all the edges, bringing some of that wood back through, even a little bit of the paint in areas, and then I give these a quick seal of that matte finish coat, or you can just use the Mod Podge on those edges. You don't have to go around the whole thing. As a matter of fact, I don't think I did. I think I just kind of sealed those edges where I sanded and brought that wood back through. Now you guys will have to let me know if you like these and if this is something you've made before. Some of these are definitely probably not new to you or even new to the creating world. Now I put a price tag of $3.95 on these, and I packaged them up all together on a vintage music card. You definitely can sell these separately, but I figured they would sell easier packaged up all together in a beautiful display. Let me know what you all think of these in the comment section below. Now our next project, you guys probably have these too. I purchased a very large bag of, it looked like someone got rid of their supplies. It had about 10 of these, about 30 wood spools, a lot of Dollar Tree items, and I paid $10, so it was definitely worth the money. What I'm doing is adding molds to these. What better way to make something look more expensive with molds? So I just laid them out how I thought I might want them, and then got to work gluing them together like we did the other projects. We're going to use that Titebond glue, just a tad of hot glue, get these set up, and then add our paint to these. Since we have already done this in the previous project with the molds, I'm not going to go through a lot of the process of gluing these. Just remember, I do heat these up to mold my lady, my little cameo there, and my wings with my heat gun and smash them down and clamp them so that they look more formed together. For these, I did pick out a couple of brighter colors than what we've used. I picked out Queen Bee and Prom Queen by DIY. We're going to give these a really good thick coat. I'm pre-mixing these with some salt wash because these molds where they're layered some really need some thick stuff to kind of go under those cracks. So I wanted to go ahead and get this pre-mixed. As I'm painting these, I'm being very mindful of those cracks or crevices or places underneath the molds, and I am just stuffing that paint really underneath, and I'm letting these dry for at least 24 hours before I go back in and do anything else to them because of the amount of paint layered that might be underneath of the like this cameo mold. I didn't realize how much I love this Prom Queen, but when I was looking for a color to go on this, it really just, I thought of Marie Antoinette with the cameo and the kind of French looking pieces the molds reminded me of. Now this next color is quite brighter, the Queen Bee, and it does take more than one good thick coat of this. Even mixed with the salt wash, it takes 2 good coats of this to cover that black. Once these dry, we're going to add a coat of white wax by Debbie's Design Diary, DIY white wax. We're going to also add this very heavily to tone back these colors and give them that sort of dreamy look. Kind of like we did the other ones with the very heavy coat of white wax, we're going to leave these sitting for a few minutes and then add that beautiful rub and buff to these, really altering their look. I'm going to go ahead and rub some of this back like we did before, just kind of bringing some of that paint back through. Now the blue doesn't really come back through so bright as the yellow does, but they both still look really, really beautiful. Before we finish these with that rub and buff, I decided to go ahead and add a sawtooth hanger to the back of these because I thought these will look gorgeous in a wall display with a lot of other items and artwork, especially if you wanted to make a large French display. Just one of these and different items. I love doing those vignettes on the wall, so I figured a sawtooth hanger would be the best. And my favorite is these ones that you just kind of hammer in. You don't have to use screws, and I get these from Amazon. Look at the difference this antique gold makes on these angel wings and this cameo. I'm doing a couple of these for you so you can see we've already done these in the previous projects, but I had to show the change on camera. Let me know what you think of these and if they still look like they came from the Dollar Tree or if they still look like they started out from the Dollar Tree. I put a price of $5.95 a piece on these, except for the one with angel wings, and I put $6.95 because it's a lot larger and took definitely more resin. This next project, you may not have the exact ones, but you may have the larger ones in your stash. Now, I had purchased some of these, again, at 90% off during Christmas one year from Hobby Lobby, intending on giving them as gifts or including them in a gift, but we're going to be using them today in our mass making. I also have one that's kind of larger than the other ones, and I'm not sure where I got it from, but the ones from Hobby Lobby have the Noel and I think Joy on them. We're going to do the same process. We're going to be painting these, and I think I actually use the off-white on these because the papers I'm using, they don't need a bright white behind them. That's one thing to think about. Whatever your paper you're using or napkin, if it doesn't have a bright background and you use white, it will definitely make it brighter. And these are going to look a little aged, so I used that same, I think it's Crinoline by DIY. Now here I'm just spraying my paper a little bit to help it expand and roll around my rolling pin. I'm going to put some Mod Podge on to start out with. I'm going to add a little Mod Podge onto the paper and then lay it onto the rolling pin. And as I roll it around, I'm going to finish adding more Mod Podge on the roller. Now, it really helps if you use a non-stick mat while you're doing this, because really it's impossible to not get this roller touching something. And I found that this parchment paper works great. I had an accident with my silicone mat and I ordered a new one, so it will be hopefully in the next video. I've had to use some wallpaper in the background, but right now we're using a parchment paper as our non-stick. So I'm just continuing to add that on there, and once we let this dry, we're going to sand those edges on the ends to give it more of a kind of distressed look. Now I just cut mine at the edge. You can tear this. Either way, you're either going to have a torn edge or you're going to have a straight edge, and I didn't mind the straight edge on mine. I just thought with this one it looked better. I use my paintbrush, the tip of it or the end of it or any of it, to help smooth out wrinkles. I don't know if you noticed that right there, but I just take it and kind of smash over it a little bit, and it doesn't tear it. Just be real careful when you do that. Once these dry, what I'm going to do is sand those little edges like we already talked about, just trying to sand them downward, not necessarily back towards the paper. It's very awkward with these, but it worked out. And what I did, I wanted to do something to the ends of these because they're still raw wood, which is very beautiful, but I thought that we would use some of the Antique and Glaze by, I've lost the name, Fusion. Antique and Glaze by Fusion on these, and it just soaked right up, and I actually had to go over some of them a little bit more, but I loved how it turned out on these because it wasn't very glossy, and I'm assuming it's because the wood was very dry. Our next project is going to be a set of coasters. Now, I didn't mention these earlier. I got these at our Mighty Dollar. Now, our Mighty Dollar things are $1.25, just like the Dollar Tree. They went up when Dollar Tree went up. And we're going to go ahead and use some stamping on these. I've not done that yet in this video, and I wanted to show you how to use your stamps to make money off of them as well, or to make gifts. We're also going to be using some of this Dollar Tree cork adhesive backing, and I'm going to use some Fusion paint in one of the cream colors. I can't remember the name. To start out with, because I just want the backing to be smooth. I'm going to stamp on these, and I don't need no texture. I'm using this butterfly stamp from IOD, and some of my StazOn ink. I thought these colors were beautiful for spring, plus I could just easily stamp with them and not use paint and have to clean up. But I was a little disappointed, and I'll tell you why here shortly. So I went ahead and made sure that I had something covering the stamps around my butterfly, I didn't want to take them off of the plastic, which I could have, but I didn't. So I'm just going to cover these up with some tape in case they have ink on them. And I do that in between each butterfly each time I stamp. Next time, just take the butterfly off. It really would have been easier. So I'm holding this stamp down firmly and doing the kind of kiss touch method where you just kind of tap the stamp all over. You don't want to smash it down real flat because it will cause it to smear. Once I get finished with that, I'm going to go ahead and let it set to the side and dry before I clear coat this. Once these have dried very thoroughly, I'm going to get my cork backing, just trace around it and cut it out with my scissors, peel the back off and stick it on. Now, once I stick it on there, if there's anything hanging over, I'm going to go ahead and just cut that off with my scissors to make it look very neat. Now, I did let these sit and dry for a while, and coming up, you're going to see why I was disappointed. So I've used StazOn for many years, and generally, once you stamp it, it stays on. It doesn't transfer. So I don't know if it was this ink. Maybe it wasn't dry. This ink pad was very moist. But as soon as I put down my matte clear coat, it started smearing. And I was like, what is going on? I was very aggravated. So what I did was I thought, okay, it wasn't dry, and I just dabbed off the best I could, and I fixed my paint on there, and I had to change routes with this one. The next big mistake I make is I thought I would get my new can of spray Mod Podge. Come on, it's Mod Podge. I've used Mod Podge forever. Rarely do I even smell anything, leave alone this craziness. Okay, so I'm in my studio, and it is not a small space, but it's inside. And I thought that I would just spray a quick coat on these. Well, I did, but the smell was insane. It was like toluene or something that you definitely don't want to be breathing in. So I had to abandon the studio. I took all of the coasters outside and let them sit in my garage for like 2 days. I knew better. I mean, anything that's in an aerosol can cannot smell good, but I was just assuming. So that's my little story with these. And one of them, even the green, you can see there smears from the spray, and I'm just sitting here going, really, what is going on? So I start wiping, which is the next mistake. But I do get them looking pretty decent. I go back in, restamp, clean up, do all the things, and they end up looking pretty nice. What's funny is this green one, see how blurred it is? And I sprayed it. I didn't even use a brush. And the blue one didn't turn out that bad at all. I was able to save it. The green one I didn't put in my booth, but the other three I did, and I just put for $2.50 a piece. Now, if this was a full set, you could price them per set, but since I only have 3, I'm just singularly pricing these. Plus, they are different colors, but the same stamp, so they may sell one singular to people, because sometimes people don't want a whole set of coasters, or they only need 2. Now, if it would have been a full set, these probably could sell for around $10. You could probably get more. A lot of people sell these for much, much more. So our last and final project is another set of these clothespins. We're going to use washi tape on these. I thought this was a great idea. Now, I do a little bit of backtracking while making these, but I pulled out 2 of my Tim Holtz, or 3 of my Tim Holtz fabric tape. It's not really washi tape. This stuff is amazing on these. They were really simple. What I ended up doing, I do have a roll laying there that is actually some William Morris print, and that is definitely washi tape. So I end up using Mod Podge underneath of it just for an extra hold, or maybe even glue stick. And then I seal all of these with a good coat of that clear matte finish. These things were really easy to do, and then I pre-packaged them, and you'll see that coming up. So our bonus project is framed prints. I buy vintage frames or just even new frames that are at thrift stores. I try not to spend more than $2 a frame. Generally on this size, I'll spend 99 cents. However, these were older vintage and had a little ornateness on them, so I did spend $1.99 a piece. Other items that I sell every single month in my booth, my vendor's booth, it's at an antique vendor mall, is black and white photos. I purchased a box of 700 black and white photos from like the 50s. Some of them actually was all the way back through Victorian. They even had ladies in the Victorian outfits, so they were like late 1800s. Most of them were more like 1940s to 1950s. And I purchased them for $126, and I have sold way more than that and still have hundreds of those photos left. I generally price my black and white photos starting at $2.25 all the way up to $8 a piece, depending on what type of photo they are, what's in the picture, how old it is, and then if it's something very popular. I also purchased 3,000 vintage postcards for $260, and I sell those in my booth all the time, especially postcards that have writing on them. You're going to charge more for those. Out of the ones that I purchased that had they had a lot of writing on some of them, those I definitely priced more than the ones that were just a collected one that wasn't sent through the mail. So you want to pay attention to those things and definitely price accordingly. But by the time that I sell the 700 photos, even if I sold them at $2 a piece, you're looking at $1,400. So the profit margin is huge. And now I also make up packages. I used to do a lot of junk journaling. So I had a lot of vintage items like kids' flashcards, game pieces, tickets, those types of things. I will sit down and make up 50 to 60 packs of those, and then I'll take and put 10 in my booth. And then when those start selling, I'll replace them with the ones I already have made up and priced. I will also make up all of these photos packaged in advance with pricing and the number, for my inventory. I also make mystery bags up. I will make about 20 to 30 mystery bags at one time, have them priced, already wrote in my inventory and ready to go, and I'll take about 10 to my booth, and when those start selling, I'll replace the other ones. Now I have a couple cabinets in my booth that has doors and drawers, and I will keep this extra stuff in my booth in those cabinets. That way it's already there, and as I see them be sold, I pull the things out and replace them. I sold right around $200 in postcards, black and white photos, ephemera, framed printed items, book pages, and that was a chunk of the money that I made in my booth. Those tiny small things paid my booth rent and more. There was a profit there. So if you would like more videos like this, let me know in the comment section. I would love to do a full video on everything that I actually sell in my booth, types of items that I sell in my booth outside of what we've already talked about, do a booth tour, and let you know how much I made for the whole month, how much of that was actually profit, and how much of it was cost. So if you would like more videos like this, let me know in the comments below. If you like this video, go ahead and comment down below and let me know, and I will see you in the next video.